What if an entire city was saved because one woman had the courage to speak? She had no army. She held no position of power. The Bible doesn't even tell us her name. But while soldiers were battering the walls of her city, she called the commander of the king's army closer and somehow made him stop and listen. She essentially said, "Before you destroy everything, perhaps you and I should have a conversation." And I love that, because sometimes courage doesn't look like charging into battle with a sword in your hand. Sometimes courage looks like calling someone over and saying, "Excuse me, Joab, could we perhaps discuss why you are about to demolish my entire city?" So today we're going to look at a woman who knew when it was time to speak. She was peaceful, but she wasn't passive. She was respectful, but she wasn't afraid to say what needed to be said. And because she spoke, an entire city was spared. But I also want us to talk about what happens when we speak courageously and people do not listen. Because not every difficult conversation ends with the city being saved. So stay with me, because this episode is about finding the courage to speak the truth with love, even when your voice shakes and even when you can't control what happens afterwards. And on that note, let me welcome you into the Jules4Jesus Podcast. I'm Jules, and this is a space where we take faith seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. Because if we did, I would already have turned one small sentence in the book of Numbers into a 6-part investigative documentary, complete with a notice board, red string, and several biblical characters being called in for questioning. And honestly, that's nearly what happened. I was reading Numbers 26 when one name caught my attention: Sarah. Asher had a daughter named Sarah. That was it. One small sentence in brackets. No explanation, no story, just her name. And naturally, instead of simply carrying on with the chapter like a calm and sensible person, I went looking for answers. Who was she? Why was she named? Was there more to her story? The honest answer is that the Bible doesn't tell us very much about Sarah at all. Her name appears more than once in Scripture, but we are never given a story about her life. During my research, I came across the suggestion that she may possibly have been the wise woman who appears in 2 Samuel 20. Now, I want to be clear. The Bible doesn't say that she was. Perhaps she was Sarah, perhaps she wasn't. Unfortunately, we don't need to solve that mystery for the story to speak to us. Sarah was simply the name that led me to the woman on the wall. So grab your rock climbing shoes and ropes and let's go climbing. Because there's a woman standing on the wall of a city called Abel who has something very important to teach us. Before we meet her though, there's one small detail about Sarah's family that stayed with me. Sarah was the daughter of Asher. When Asher was born, his mother Leah said in Genesis 30, "How happy I am, the women will call me happy." So she named him Asher, a name connected with happiness and blessing. And when I looked up the possible meanings of Sarah's name, I found words such as abundance, something free-flowing, and even princess. The exact meaning is debated, so I'm not going to build an entire message on the meaning of one name. That would be a lot of pressure to place on poor Sarah. But the words are still beautiful. Happiness, abundance, something that flows freely. And they made me think about joy. Not the kind of happiness that depends on everything going your way. Not the kind that disappears the moment somebody sends you a slightly rude message. I mean the joy that's rooted in God. Nehemiah 8 says, "The joy of the Lord is your strength." Joy in the Lord gives us strength. And when we keep walking with God, that strength helps us to remain faithful. It helps us pause instead of immediately reacting. It helps us pray before we panic. It helps us ask, "Lord, what's really happening here? What needs to be said? And how do you want me to say it?" And that, my friend, that's where wisdom begins. And that brings us to the woman on the wall. Her story appears in 2 Samuel 20. David has recently returned to Jerusalem after the rebellion led by his son Absalom. But almost immediately, another rebellion begins. A man named Sheba, son of Bichri, turns against David and leads people away from the king. Joab, the commander of David's army, pursues Sheba until he hides inside the city of Abel Beth-maachah. Joab's army surrounds the city. They build a siege ramp. They begin battering the wall. Imagine being inside. You can hear the noise outside. You can feel the wall shaking. You know that if the soldiers break through, the whole city could suffer because of one man hiding inside of it. And then a wise woman calls out, "Listen, listen. Tell Joab to come here so that I can speak to him." I love how direct she is. She doesn't send a message saying, "Whenever Joab has a convenient gap in his schedule, and only if he's not too busy destroying our city, perhaps he could come and have a quick chat." No, she calls him over. The wall is shaking, the city's in danger, and she knows this isn't the time to remain politely silent. Joab comes closer. She asks whether he is Joab. He says that he is, and then she says, "Listen to what your servant has to say." And Joab replies, "I'm listening." And that's remarkable. This woman hasn't got any army behind her. No title is given to her. We are not told that she holds any official position, but she has wisdom. She has credibility, and she has the courage to use her voice. She says in 2 Samuel 20, "We are the peaceful and faithful in Israel." Then she asks him, "You are trying to destroy a city that's a mother in Israel. Why do you want to swallow up the Lord's inheritance?" Peaceful and faithful, but not passive. She doesn't confuse being peaceful with never speaking up. She doesn't believe that faithfulness means standing quietly while something precious is being destroyed. She speaks respectfully, but she also speaks clearly. She essentially says, "Joab, you are so focused on one man that you are about to destroy everybody around him." And that's wisdom. Wisdom looks past the chaos and asks, what's the actual problem here? Because when we are hurt, angry, or frightened, we can attack far more than the thing that is actually wrong. One disagreement becomes an attack on an entire relationship. One mistake becomes proof that nothing has ever been good. One difficult person causes us to pull away from everybody. One disappointment makes us want to knock down walls that took years to build. But this woman, she slows everything down. She doesn't ignore the danger. She doesn't pretend that Sheba has done nothing wrong. She simply refuses to allow an entire city to be destroyed because one dangerous man is hiding inside of it. There's a difference between wisdom and avoidance. Avoidance says, let's pretend that there's no problem. Wisdom says, there's a problem. Let us deal with that problem without destroying everything around it. Joab explains that he's not trying to destroy the city. He wants Sheba. Once the actual issue is clear, the wise woman takes the matter to her people. Sheba is handed over. Joab sounds the trumpet and the army withdraws. The city is saved. One woman spoke. One powerful man listened, and destruction stopped at the wall. Now it would be easy to hear this story and think, wonderful, so if I speak courageously, everything will work out. But that's not always what happens, my friend. Sometimes you speak the truth and people don't listen. Sometimes you explain the real problem and they refuse to see it. Sometimes you speak with love and they accuse you of being unloving. Sometimes you draw a necessary boundary and somebody blames you for the pain that boundary reveals. Sometimes you say everything you believe God has placed on your heart and people still return to the same destructive patterns. So courage isn't a guarantee that you will save the city. Faithfulness is not measured only by whether people agree with you. You can choose your words. You can choose your attitude. You can pray. You can examine your own heart. You can speak truth with love. But you cannot make another person listen. And you can't force them to change. That part belongs to them. And God, your part is obedience. Jesus told his disciples to take the message they had been given into towns and homes. If people refused to receive them, they were allowed to shake the dust from their feet and move on. But first, they had to deliver the message. They had to speak. And perhaps there are times when peace comes not because the situation has been fixed, but because you know you didn't remain silent out of fear. You said what needed to be said. You said it as honestly and as lovingly as you could. You obeyed God. And then you placed the outcome in His hands. Because even when the city is saved, the glory doesn't belong to the person standing on the wall. It belongs to God. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 1 that God often chooses what appears weak and unimpressive so that no one may boast before Him. And then he says, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. God may use your voice, your wisdom, or your courage, my friend, but He's still the one who changes hearts, opens eyes, and brings the breakthrough. So if people listen, give God the glory. And if they don't listen, do not carry the outcome as though it was yours to control. That's not failure. That's faithfulness. The woman of Abel couldn't control Joab. She could not control his army. She could not guarantee that he would listen. She simply used what she had, her voice, her wisdom, her faithfulness. And in her case, the city was saved. In your case, the outcome may look different, but your obedience still matters. And that brings us back to joy and abundance. When we think of abundance, we often think of having more money, more opportunities, more comfort, more recognition. But Jesus says in John 10 that He came so that we may have life to the full. The woman on the wall didn't appear to be living a particularly comfortable life at the moment. There was an army outside. The wall was being attacked, but she still had an abundance that mattered. She had enough peace not to lose herself in panic, enough wisdom to see the real problem, enough courage to speak, enough faithfulness to care about her community, and enough hope to believe that one conversation could still make a difference. Perhaps abundance isn't only about what we have. Perhaps it's also about what flows from us. Does peace flow from us when everybody else is panicking? Does wisdom flow from us when people are reacting? Does courage flow from us when silence would be easier? Does grace flow from us even when the truth is difficult? That doesn't mean we always get it right. It doesn't mean we never feel afraid. It doesn't mean we walk around smiling while our lives fall apart. Biblical joy isn't pretending. It's a deep confidence that God is still God, even when the wall is shaking. It's the strength to remain faithful when running away would feel easier. And perhaps that's how joy becomes more than a feeling. Joy gives strength. Strength helps us to remain faithful. Faithfulness teaches us to pause, pray, and see more clearly. And that kind of wisdom gives us the courage to say what needs to be said. Not because speaking guarantees a perfect outcome, not because speaking guarantees that people will listen, but because a life rooted in God can still bring peace, clarity, and truth into a very difficult moment. A wise word may protect a relationship. A boundary may protect a family. An honest conversation may stop unnecessary damage. And sometimes, simply saying the truth means that you no longer have to carry the burden of all the words that you were afraid to speak. That's also a kind of freedom, my friend. And this is where the royal priesthood message becomes so meaningful. 1 Peter 2 verse 9 says, "You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession." We belong to the King. But being part of a royal priesthood is not about walking around feeling more important than everyone else. It's not about wearing an invisible crown and expecting people to recognize our greatness. It's about representing the King well. It's about bringing His peace into conflict, His truth into confusion, His wisdom into chaos, His grace into difficult conversations. The woman on the wall acted with that kind of purpose. She understood that the city was part of the Lord's inheritance. She wasn't only defending her own comfort, she was protecting something precious. And maybe there's something in your own life that needs you to stop keeping quiet. Perhaps it's your family, your child, a friendship, a workplace situation, a relationship where everybody is avoiding the real issue. Perhaps it's your own peace, which has been battered far too long by somebody else's chaos. Courage doesn't always mean a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes courage is asking one honest question. Sometimes it's saying, "This is not healthy." Sometimes it's refusing to participate in gossip. Sometimes it's drawing a boundary. Sometimes it's saying, I love you, but I cannot continue pretending that this isn't happening. The wise woman didn't need a platform. She needed one moment of courage. She stood on the wall and said what needed to be said. That's purpose. And perhaps that's why Sarah's small mention first caught my attention. Sarah's remembered by name, but we are not given her story. The wise woman of Abel is given a story, but we are not told her name. One woman is remembered by name. The other is remembered by what she did. And both remind us that God doesn't need the world to know your name for your faithfulness to matter. You may feel like one name hidden in a long list. You may feel unseen. You may wonder whether your quiet obedience is making any difference. But faithfulness isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like one honest conversation, one boundary, one wise word, one moment when you choose courage instead of silence. So my friend, may the joy of the Lord be your strength. May that strength keep you faithful. May your faithfulness grow into wisdom. And when the moment comes, may God give you the courage to use your voice. You don't have to look impressive. You don't have to feel completely ready. And you certainly don't need to have any answer. Speak with grace. Speak with wisdom. Speak with courage. And once you have spoken faithfully, place the outcome in God's hands. Sometimes one faithful voice stops destruction at the wall. And sometimes people don't listen. But obedience still brings peace. And that's what I want for you. This is Jules and I'm for Jesus. And this has been the Jules4Jesus Podcast. Can't wait for us to chat again soon.